Hey everybody, this is the help video for Langston Hughes picture book part 2 assignment. We started part 1 on Thursday, so I'm going to quickly go over what we talked about or what you read in part 1, and then we'll go on to part 2. It's going to be a 3-part assignment total, just like I was saying in the other video that some people are overwhelmed by if it's broken up into just 2 parts, so that is why it is 3. So this is the book not written by Langston Hughes, but about Langston Hughes, similar to the book that we read about Zora Neale Hurston, kind of building on their biography. So we only had a few pages that we read last time, but just wanted to show where we left off. So just talking about his living situation. Remember, he didn't live with his mom or dad, so he's talking about how he lives with his grandma. His grandma was a big inspiration for him. She kind of got him into reading. So that is where part 1 left off. So we're going to part 2. So the purpose of this is to continue learning about the nonfiction life of Langston Hughes, to see how his experiences show up in his fictional work and poems. So Hughes, again, is one of the biggest figures of the Harlem Renaissance. And even if you are not African American, this is still like seeing how people of color expressed themselves back at this time when it was not easy to do it all, but because of obvious racism and other cultures too, not just African American. It was this kind of inspired other cultures to express themselves in America as well. So that is the importance of the Harlem Renaissance, not just for in the context of African American culture, but also other cultures in the United States. Just a reminder. All right, so we'll continue. Sometimes Langston's dreams about having a family came true, like the time he, his ma, and grandma really did go to Mexico to see his father. Maybe finally Langston would have a home of his own. But on April 14th, 1907, the ground in Mexico began to tremble. Everything shook, including the building they were in. Langston's pa, carrying Langston, led everyone out onto the street. Everywhere, walls of buildings cracked and split open. Giant tarantula spiders scurried out of the cracks. That was enough for his ma. As soon as the trains were running again, she and his grandma and Langston climbed back to the train, back on the train, rode back to Kansas. Langston whispered a goodbye to Mexico, his father, and to having a home of his own. Okay, so using your inference skills and background information, what is happening in this picture? Pay close attention to paragraph 2 to help you understand this. The author uses great imagery to describe what's going on here. So this is the paragraph focus on specifically. Just kind of what's happening in this picture, in this paragraph. Kind of summarizing. All right, moving on. Sometimes Langston's ma would send for him. He'd ride the train to Kansas City Bottoms, where she'd meet him and go off, and off they'd go. They'd see plays, the opera, and visit the library, where Langston was fascinated by the big, bright, silent reading room, the long, smooth tables, and librarians who would so kindly get books for him. Sometimes, when she was busy, his mother would leave him at his Uncle Dee's barber shop. He liked it there, right in the center of the Black District. He'd go and wander the nearby streets, speak to folks passing by, a nod here, a hat tip there, but mostly Langston would listen. He'd ride his ears around the city, through Market Street, where everyone sang the song of Haggle, down side streets filled with kids who ran and played forever, up the block where where clubs and dance halls played jazzy old blues music that drifted down the alleys and tickled his soul. Langston felt the rhythms. All right, so Langston Hughes was known for his lyrical writing that included a rhythmic beat. We talked about that when you read the poem by him last week. Look at this picture and inference what childhood experiences probably influenced his poetic writing. Write in a complete sentence in the bottom box by first introducing the sentence by restating the question. So, restating the question, we practiced that before. You're answering what in this picture, in this paragraph, influenced his poetic writing. So you could say, Langston Hughes' poetic writing was influenced by blank. That's restating the question and then answering. So just think about rhythm and what's going on in this picture that influenced his poetry. Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, feel free to shoot me an email or a Schoology message or during office hours. All right, moving on. Other times, Langston's ma would come to Lawrence. Once it wasn't the best of times for her. Money was scarce. She snapped at Langston and it hurt. Later that evening, they went to St. Luke's Church, where Langston's ma was giving a performance. She told him that she had a wonderful surprise for him, that he was going to be on the stage with her, that he was going to be a star, just like she was going to be. Langston didn't like the surprise. That evening, he was the one with the surprise. As his mom introduced him behind her back, Langston made faces. He crossed his eyes, stretched his mouth, and imitated her. Everyone burst out laughing. The more people laughed, the more faces he made. Embarrassed, his mother rushed off stage. So, Langston Hughes' mother, Carrie, made her living as a performer. This is the biggest reason why she was not around for Langston when he was a child. So he lived with his grandma because his dad was a lawyer in Mexico and his mom was a stage performer, and they both kind of didn't spend time with him. So this is the scene where he saw her perform. So what you're going to do is write a dialogue that matches what's happening in this scene. So Carrie is his mom and Langston. What's the dialogue that matches what's going on in the scene? Don't just look at the picture. Make sure you read this or listen to me read it again if you need to. As Langston's grandma got on in years, she grew more and more silent. Then the time came when she hardly spoke at all. The little home where he had lived so long was quiet and lonely, with Grandma rocking silently in her rocking chair. A real home seemed less than ever like something Langston would ever have. Then he went to live with friends of the family across town, Auntie and Uncle Reed, he called them. Okay, so using empathy, pretend you are Langston Hughes at this point in his life. Write an inner thinking sentence about what he may be thinking to himself while all of this change is happening in his life. So use this box here to write that. Make sure you change the font to match like what inner thinking looks like in a book. We've talked about that. It's always written a certain way. Change the style of font. You can click up here on these. You should have the same options. All right, moving on. When Langston first saw the dinner table at the Reeds, he had never seen so much food in his life. After the blessing, Uncle Reed smiled and told Langston to eat up. He didn't have to tell Langston twice. Then Auntie, in a voice as sweet as dessert, said there was more out in the kitchen. Langston soon learned that there would always be more from Auntie and Uncle Reed. More food and more hugs and more love. So the author of this book used a lot of imagery showing the story through words, not just telling how people acted. So using your inference skills again, pull out a sentence in this passage that best identifies how young Langston was treated at his new home. So this part you can just copy word for word because it's textual evidence. It doesn't let you just copy and paste, but you can write it word for word or type it, I guess. And then make sure you use quotation marks because it is textual evidence. So you're just writing how Langston Hughes felt at this new home with his aunt and uncle, like writing the word for word. Okay, that is the last question for today. This is most of the book. Tomorrow there'll be a little bit more, and then we're going to move on to a short story that he wrote called One Friday Morning. So hopefully you enjoyed this. If you ever feel like you don't know why we're learning something or just don't see how it applies to like real life or anything, just let me know and we can have that discussion. I try to be clear with that, but sometimes it doesn't come across that way. So I just wanted to remind you of that too, if you just aren't engaged in the work, and that's why. Okay, everybody, if you have other questions, just feel free to let me know. I'm always here if you need help or need anything else, so just let me know. All right, bye, everybody.